Today's episode is brought to you by Roosters, a noble grill in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They provide an upscale menu of Southern food and dishes with international influences made from local ingredients. More info on them at the end of the episode.
Welcome to the Semmax Way, the definitive podcast for mastering finance, investment, and retirement planning. Prepare to unlock the secrets to financial success as we delve into lucrative investment strategies and provide expert guidance towards a secure retirement. With over 20 years of experience, Semmax Financial Group has been dedicated to serving investors, and through this podcast, we aim to empower you with the knowledge to maximize your savings and achieve lasting financial freedom the Semmax Way. Whether you're a professional finance enthusiast, a high net worth individual, or part of a sophisticated investment group, this podcast is tailor-made for you. And now, here is your host, Matt Landon, financial advisor for Semmax Financial Group and licensed CFP.
Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that I think is well understood by certain folks and not understood at all by others. Today, we're going to talk about, do I have enough? Am I on track? What do I need to do to create the income I'm looking for? Now, this is a question that comes up oftentimes with folks when they're stepping into my office and they're either about to retire, they're a couple of years away from retirement, and it's a conversation that we're able to talk through. The beautiful thing is, in many cases, folks are able to retire quicker than they thought they could, and their funds are looking a little bit more vibrant or can produce more assets than they were under the impression that they could. So that's a positive thing. In other cases, we go, you know what, the numbers just don't match up. But there's a couple key rules we can talk about here. There's a couple key areas you want to explore and kind of understand, and it's really going to answer a lot of questions for you. And if you follow these rules, it can really let you know, am I on track? Do I need to make some adjustments? Now, I'm going to go ahead and warn you, you got to do a little homework here. So I'm going to give you some generals, just kind of a hypothetical situation, but you're going to have to back into if that is on track for you or not. So let's start off by beginning with a budget. I know you may not love having a budget, and a lot of us don't. The point of having this budget is not to necessarily put a huge constraint on you, but it's really to understand where you're at. Now, you could do the same thing with a spending study. You know, you could do a time study. I know something that I've done in the past that I think has been very valuable is to do a time study where you actually look at throughout the day, where am I spending my time? You try and subdivide it down and record it. And when you get done, you're able to look and realize, wow, I spent a lot more time on my phone, or I spent a lot more time wasted than I'd really like to. It really just kind of sheds some light on it. With a budget or a spending study, you can do the same thing. You can look at it and say, hey, I now know where my money's going. Now, just due to the nature of putting this down and recording it, it's probably going to alter your spending habit just a little bit. If we're being honest with ourselves, oftentimes we go, I don't really want to spend that money because I don't want to have to put it down and be held accountable for it, right? The point here is not to try and shame you with your current spending habits. The point is for you to really understand what you're spending on a day-to-day basis. So once you've kind of got that number in your head as far as how much you need on a monthly basis, the next thing you want to do is look at some kind of like a CPI calculator. Now, there's a pretty good one you can get at data.bls.gov. It's not a complicated calculator. You can actually just Google CPI inflation calculators and different things. But if you need, let's just say you need $4,000 a month to live off of, and you're saying, okay, that's my number. Now, I'm using 4,000 because it's an easy number to work with. Of course, your number's probably going to be a little bit different than that, right? There's no problem with that. But let's just say you're looking at it and you say, I need $4,000 a month today. What that turns into is $48,000 a year. You need $48,000 a year. But that's in today's dollars. You have to factor in inflation. So if you look at a CPI inflation calculator and you put in $48,000 and you did it for January of 2000, fast forward to September of 2023, an equivalent dollar amount, the same purchasing power, okay, In order to have an equivalent purchasing power is that $48,000, meaning how far does that money go? You would need $87,522.84. Right. It's almost double. So think about today. If you need $4,000 a month to live off of, moving into the future, let's say you want to retire in 23 years, you're going to need about $87,000 a year after taxes. That's the net take home. So you got to build taxes into it. So let's go kind of conservative with this. Let's give you a little bit of taxes. So you want to factor that in. Let's just say taxes between federal and state is going to be 30%. So take your number, times it by 1.3. You can do it in a calculator on your phone. That gives you the gross figure of what you need. Now that gross figure, we're still working off of that $48,000 in today's dollars, jumping 23 years into the future, giving you a 30% tax rate. We're talking about $113,778.60. Okay. We are well past doubling that account. Right? So when you look at this, you're saying, okay, today I need 48,000. In the future, I'm going to need 113,000 before taxes to give me equivalent purchasing power to have the same lifestyle as I'm enjoying today. Now, we're not quite done yet, because we've got this little thing called Social Security. Maybe you've got a pension. Maybe you've got other sources of income like that. So you got to back that back out. So let's just say Social Security, you look at it, you can look at the Social Security figures. You can see what Social Security is expecting to pay you at your full retirement at 62. Well, let's just say 23 years from now, you're going to be at your full retirement age. And again, we're using really, really easy round numbers here. Let's just say Social Security is going to give you $30,000. Take your $113,000, go ahead and subtract $30,000 from that. That leaves us with about $83,778. So what you can do is think about the rule of 4%. From a distribution standpoint, from a bucket standpoint, you really don't want to be pulling more than about 4% out of your assets in order to have it be sustainable indefinitely. The lower you go, the better, but we really don't want to tip our toes too far above that 4% line. So in order to get our $83,778 after subtracting Social Security before paying taxes, thinking back to that $4,000 a month figure today, what do we need to do? Well, I'll tell you. What you need to do here is take your figure. In this case, we're using the 83,000, and you need to divide it. So you need to divide it by 0.04. What that's going to give you is that 4%. In this case, 4% would be $2,094,500. Rough numbers. So as long as you've got a little under $2,100,000 at retirement, figuring in a $30,000 Social Security and a 30% tax rate, you'll be able to produce the same lifestyle as creating $4,000 a month net today. Now, you might be looking at me going, Matt, that doesn't sound too attractive. This is why we want to run the numbers. That's a huge number. $2 million is significant. So then what you want to do is look at your current spending, look at your current saving and your current investing and say, am I on track to be at $2 million in 23 years? Am I on track with what I'm saving? Am I getting a match from my Social Security? Am I investing? Is it growing? And are we going to reach that goal that I'm looking for? The other thing to ask yourself is, are there other ways to produce those funds if I'm a little bit under what I need? Is there something that can give me a 4.5% or a 5% or a 6% distribution rate safely? There are. That's where you might want to consider utilizing an annuity. That's also where, if you have a pension, one of the questions to ask is, should I be taking the lump sum? Should I be taking the cash payout? Right? But I think the key thing here is you really want to ask yourself, am I going to have enough in retirement? Well, let's walk through what those steps are. First, you need to know in today's dollars what you're spending. What do you need? Then you need to look at it and account for inflation. Think about your retirement date. Let's build it up. So let's look at that inflation adjusted number. Once you've got that inflation adjusted number, let's talk taxes. How much am I going to have before taxes? How much am I going to have after taxes? Once we've got those taxes in play, now let's go ahead and back out any kind of reoccurring income that we know is coming in. All right. So if I know I've got Social Security coming in, or if I know I've got pension coming in, go ahead and back those figures out. This gives you the net number you need to come up with. Now, I went with all pre-tax numbers. If you're putting money into a Roth, you can go ahead and reduce that by about 30%. And the reason being, there's no income taxes on that Roth account, provided you follow the rules. We did a whole other episode, and I'll do a lot more conversation around Roth accounts. But for now, just remember, as long as that Roth account was funded for more than 5 years, you're over the age of 59 and a half, then all of the gains, everything inside of that account, every penny you pull out is coming out income tax free. So I don't need to build inflation back into that plan if it's all sitting in Roth dollars. If it's IRA and Roth, you can have a blend of the two. Then you really need to look at your two different buckets, have the growth on both of them, and then divide it out. But in this case, we're using all pre-tax numbers because it's a really easy round way of looking at it. Another thing you could look at is IRA dollars versus non-qualified dollars, right? So just retirement dollars in general versus non-retirement dollars and the tax implications there. If your income is low enough, you can actually get to a point where your capital gains, you pay a 0% tax rate under current tax law. That's always subject to change. But I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail too far here. So I want to circle back around and let's focus on the key thing. The key thing is really around that 3 to 4% distribution rule. If you can keep that distribution below 3 to 4%, you're well on your way. The next thing is really wrapping your head around inflation. And where is inflation at today? Where is inflation at going to be in the future? And then on top of that, factoring in all of your different income sources and then looking at growth. What I like to do and what we like to do here at our office is look at things from a more conservative standpoint. I don't want to show you best case scenario numbers, right? I want to show you a little bit more of a worst case scenario number. If it ends up being great, that's phenomenal, awesome, all the better. But if it's not, you're not left holding the bag. So from a growth standpoint, I like to assume anywhere from a 4 to a 6% growth inside of your portfolio. I don't want to show you those double digit and showing you 10, 12, 14% returns. I don't think that's the way for you to get ahead from a planning standpoint. If showing you that 4% looks really good and robust, everything's gravy, then if you actually end up returning 7 or 8, all the better. But from a planning standpoint, I think you're better off looking at things from a worst case scenario, not a best case scenario. So I hope this has been helpful for you just to kind of wrap your head around where do I need to start from an income standpoint? Look at your current income, look at your needs. Now you could back certain things out if you're expecting your house to be paid off, things of that nature. I wouldn't necessarily assume, oh, well, I'm not going to have a car in the future, or I won't have a car payment. I'll be in my forever car. I would rather look realistically at where you're at from a spending standpoint now. There is a lot of folks will tell you, well, you can actually live off of about 80% of your current living expenses in retirement. Well, maybe. Yeah, you don't have to pay for a wardrobe for work, and you're not going to have all those expenses of carpooling or driving to and from the office. But at the same time, you might be spending more money on your grandkids. You might be going on vacation a little bit more. I would rather lean off of using the same numbers or even potentially a slightly higher number. If you end up spending less, that's great, but I wouldn't count on that. I think it's better off to plan from a standpoint of utilizing the same or greater. We want to live abundant lives. In the past, life expectancies were quite short. They've gotten longer. I don't want you to step into retirement with this thought process that, okay, I'm retired and that means I've really only got to have these funds last for about 5 or 6 years and then it won't be a problem anymore. that is not the type of planning I want you to be thinking through. I want you to be running this plan out to age 90 and beyond. Along with that, I think it's also important to think about it from a retirement standpoint, not just for yourself, but if you're married, for your spouse. Who's going to take care of your surviving spouse from a financial standpoint and things of that nature? Usually one spouse looks at the money, the other one doesn't pay attention to it as much. So thinking through that is going to be key. But I think what we talked about today is a really good exercise to get you started and kind of get those juices flowing. You can think about it, and it can be somewhat demoralizing if you look at how far you are from where you should be versus where you are at the moment. But I don't want you to be thinking about it from that standpoint. Instead, I want you to think about it from a fitness standpoint. Nobody that starts out in the gym is where they want to be from a fitness standpoint. I know when I started running, and I'm sorry I talk about running all the time, it's because it's something that I love, but when I started running, I made it about a mile and I had to stop, and I thought I was going to throw up. I mean, my side was just I was burning. I was in so much pain. I wasn't sure if I was even going to make it back to my car, and I had to run my way back to the car. I ran 10.5 minutes out. I walked. It took me almost 20 minutes to get back to my car. But that's not where the journey stopped. You go back, you run again, you run again. Each time you run a little bit further. Sometimes you run a little bit faster. Sometimes you actually run a little bit slower and you feel like you've gone backwards. You haven't. It's just where you're at that moment in time. But eventually you reach a place where you're running distances you thought were completely ludicrous, impossible. And you're still looking, and you're still growing, and you're still striving. You're still moving forward. It's the same thing financially. There's a time when you're a broke college student and you're looking at things and you're living off that student loan debt and you're going, I don't have an extra $20. The idea of putting $20 into a retirement account seems impossible. Well, once you start working and you're able to go, okay, I can put that $20 in. I can put that $40 in. I can put that $200 in. I can max out my 401k. I'm putting over $2,000 in. It just grows. It evolves. It develops over time. It's just like that distance runner. You start out, you run 1 mile. You feel like you can't go any further. Eventually, you sign up for that 5K. You run a 5K. And then maybe you run it again. Maybe you just stay at that 5K. You never decide you want to run faster or further. But your time keeps coming down, right? You're not worried about running a 10K. You're sticking with the 5K. But instead of a 36-minute 5K, you ran a 32-minute 5K. And a couple years later, you realize you're running a 21-minute 5K. And you're chasing that 19-minute. Other folks look at it and they conquer the 5K and they go, okay, I'm moving up. I want to do a 10K. I want to do a half marathon. I want to do a full marathon. I want to do an ultra. There's always another goal. There's always another level. There's always another place you can take it. But when we're talking about your finances, I want you to take this exercise. I want you to look at your current income. I want you to look at your future income needs and realistically say, am I on track or do I need to make some changes? There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of ways you can implement that. We're going to talk about that more in other episodes, other podcasts. But the first step is taking a really honest evaluation of where you're at today, taking stock of it. And then if you have a spouse, if you have a significant other, sitting down and saying, you know what, we need to have a very frank conversation about where we're at and our future. I think we need to enjoy the moment. We need to enjoy the present, but we also need to look at the future and kind of where we're headed. So this is a great thing you can access. I'll try and make sure we link in the show notes and an inflation calculator you can look at. Like I said, there's a really good one from the government that I like. And it's just a basic calculator. We don't have to go into super depth. If you're 25 or 30 years out, you've got a lot of time and adjustments that you can make. I think the key thing here is to just be taking a realistic account of where you're at now, where you want to be, what your goals are, and take that kind of finish line end point and look at it and kind of angle towards it. I hope this has been helpful for you. I always enjoy these conversations, these chats. It's a little bit different than doing an interview with someone, but I hope this is a tool that you can utilize. It's just one more tool in your toolbox. That said, I hope you take what you've heard today and don't just listen to it, but maybe put it into action. If it's something that you don't need, perhaps you're already in retirement, but this is something that your kids could utilize, your grandkids, a younger coworker, something along those lines, please share it with them. That said, thanks for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. And thanks for taking this journey with me as we continue doing things the Semmax way.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Semmax Way. If you're not completely satisfied with your current financial advisor, give us a call for a second opinion. Please note that this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content shared on the Semmax Way should not be considered as investment advice. It is always recommended to consult your licensed investment representative and a competent tax advisor, respectively, for your fiduciary needs and plans. No statement contained in the Semmax Way podcast or made by its producers, sponsors, host Matt Landon, or Semmax Financial Group is a recommendation. Semmax Financial Group and Matt Landon are not responsible or liable for investment value loss of any kind from any action taken based on information discussed in the Semmax Way podcast. Any opinions or viewpoints in this podcast are shared for information and entertainment purposes only and are not financial advice. We do encourage you to conduct further research and seek personalized advice for your specific financial circumstances. Full disclosure available at semmax.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you tune in for future episodes of the Semmax Way.
I'd like to pause a minute and just express our gratitude to our podcast sponsors, Noble's Food and Pursuits. This renowned restaurant group has been serving the community for an impressive 40 years, starting with Jim Noble's original restaurant, J. Basil Noble in High Point. Over the years, their passion for hospitality has flourished, leading them to expand into a diverse collection of 9 restaurants, a retail bakery, and a catering company. Today, we want to shine a spotlight on one of their beloved establishments, Rooster's, a Noble Grill, which has been proudly open for 31 years right here in Winston-Salem. Now, Rooster's is known for its commitment to offering a seasonally inspired, regionally cultivated menu featuring mouth-watering wood-fired meats, poultry, and vegetables. If you're looking for a delightful dining experience, they also host monthly wine dinners and provide live music on their inviting patio every Tuesday night. Now, make sure to pay them a visit at 380 Knollwood Street, and to secure your spot, head over to theroosterskitchen.com and make a reservation. Again, that's roosterskitchen.com.